This is ISCI 2001, Chapter 16, Part A, the Earth's Surface. We have two major themes for this lecture. The first are the processes that build up the surface. We'll break that down into three subcategories, which are stress and strain, folding, and then faulting. Our last theme for the lecture will be the origin of mountains. The processes that build up the surface of the Earth. We have diastrophism. All the possible movements of Earth's plates, including the drift toward and away from other plates, is diastrophism. It's also the process of deformation that changes the Earth's surface. Then you have volcanism or volcanism, either way you can pronounce it. It's basically the phenomenon of eruption of molten rock, which we call magma, onto the surface of the Earth, or a solid surface, or a planet or a moon. Specifically, we're talking about Earth here. But it's where lava, pyroclastics, and volcanic gases erupt through a break in the surface that we call a vent. It includes all phenomena resulting from and causing magma within the crust or mantle of the body of Earth to rise through the crust and form volcanic rocks on the surface. Then you have the movement of magma that's involved with this volcanism, and once Earth's heat melts the igneous rock, the driving force behind magma movement is primarily gravity. The density of magma is usually lower than that of the surrounding rock of the Earth, so the density contrast gives the magma the ability to rise through the crust. Once it's through the crust, gravity will then pull it in the direction that it flows. Look at all the different diastrophisms here. You can see that there are some of the mountains that have a more pointy top, like on the right hand side you can see points coming off of it, whereas on the upper left it's completely flat. Then on the bottom left you can see that there's more of a folding motion there going on. If you look on the left hand side of that picture, it looks like it kind of folds under a little bit. And then on the right you can see magma, which is going to cool and form volcanic rock. Please note that, especially like on all of them really, but on the top left, how flat it is and how arid or dry that atmosphere seems, the climate seems. You're still going to have erosion and stuff happen with all of these different mountain types. On the left-hand side, you're going to have primarily wind erosion from the wind, where the wind is blowing the rocks against them, or the sand against the rocks, and it's going to erode them. On the right-hand side at the top, you can see all of the water that's been formed by, the melting of the snow. And not all of that water was formed by melting of the snow, but a lot of it was. And you can see how there's a rundown where it forms almost a V shape from where, when ice accumulates on the mountaintop and then it melts, it runs down into that lake that's below it. So there's weathering going on there, and that weathering is going to smooth out the rock. On the left-hand side, you can see that there's actually like a cavern that's being formed in the bottom of it, and that's from the water erosion from the stream that's, if you can see it, the stream that's flowing through it. You can also see at the top, it does have grass on it, so that's going to keep the top part from being eroded because first moss grew and then eventually grass. So but any of the rock that is exposed to the outside elements, it's going to be eroded either by wind or water and such things like that. On the right-hand side, as the volcanic rock cools, you will eventually have some eroding going on. It will take a lot of years. Excuse me. But you will have water erosion depending on where it is. You'll have wind erosion. And eventually you'll see some pioneer species start to grow there, like lichens and algae or moss, that kind of thing. So keep in mind that as we're talking about these different volcanoes, once the mountains are formed, they're not going to be finished. Basically, they're still going to be going through geologic processes such as weathering. Stress and strain are the first two ways that a mountain can be formed. Stress is a force that tends to compress, pull apart, or deform a rock. And you have three different types of stress. You have compressive stress, tensional stress, and shear stress. Tensional stress is when it's being pulled apart. You can see the arrows at the top left pulling apart the two sides and the kind of break that it forms in the middle. compressional stress is where those mountains are being pushed together, and you can see up at the top of the picture, that's how the mountains that have peaks at the top of them, that have the points at the top, that's how those are formed, are compressional. And then you have shear stress, which is where they basically just move past each other, and it forms the mountain. With strain, it's an adjustment to stress, and you have elastic, plastic, and fracture strains. At the top, you can see the elastic strain, basically where there's a strike-slip fault, which is locked. You have your ductile shear zone. You have your base of brittle crust, which is transitional. At the top, the yellow part, it says ground surface. You can see that those two plates are moving against each other. So when they do move against each other, if you look on the gray part, you can see how it makes them curve. And that's why we call that elastic. At the bottom, we have a plastic strain. You can see at the top, the rock at the top of the picture is sliding across it. You can see the amount of strain that it puts on the surface beneath it. Blue being, not a lot, red being a whole lot, and you can see where, as it moves across, that there's 3 columns. The first column doesn't really get a whole bunch of pressure on it, but once it moves to the middle, you can see the oranges and the yellows and the reds, and where there's a lot of strain. And then finally, as it moves to the last one, there's even more on that corner. So that's plastic strain. Then you have your fracture, and basically what it says is as the amount of stress increases, the amount of strain increases. So you have your elastic deformation, and as your elastic deformation hits the bastic limit, the elastic limit, the stress causes it to actually fracture. Once it hits that ductile deformation, it can only go so far before the rock will break, because with anything, everything's got its breaking limit. So you can see at the bottom, it's got the permanent strain, and then the fracture will end at that permanent strain. It'll go at a diagonal. Folding are bends in layered bedrock resulting from plastic strain on buried layers of horizontal rock. You can see it, especially at the bottom part of the top left picture, how there are curves in the rock. This is formed by folding. The picture on the right hand side also shows folding. So it's just basically where there's so much pressure that it actually causes the rock to fold over on itself. With this type of folding, you have anticline and you have syncline. Anticline is going to be the one that creates a fold up. Syncline is going to be a fold down. Faulting. A fault is a crack in the rock. When there's a relative movement between the rocks on either side of a fracture, it causes a fault line. We have 3 different types of fault lines. We have normal, reverse, and thrust. Here you see the 3 types of faults. You have strike slip, which we also call reverse. Then you have normal, and then you have thrust. The strike slip is where, as you can see at the top picture, where there's grass with a stream running through it. It's going to move the plates left to right, making it where the stream is no longer continuous. With the normal, what you're going to find is the portion of the rock that's affected is going to drop down, and then the thrust is where the plate on the left actually pushes the rock affected up, so it is actually thrust up. This is kind of what causes or it can cause like waterfalls and that kind of thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has formed a waterfall, but this is one of the things that it can. With normal, it's the same thing, just depending on how the stream is flowing. Sometimes this can actually cut off streams and form a lake, and then sometimes it won't really affect the flow of water very much other than forming a different water flow. Origin of mountains. Folding and faulting have created most of the interesting features of Earth's surface, and the most prominent of these features are mountains. Mountains are elevated parts of Earth's crust that rise abruptly above the surrounding surface. There are three types of mountains: folding, faulting, and volcanic activity. This picture shows the three different types of forming a mountain. You have the folding, which is the top left, the faulting, which is the bottom left, and then the volcanic, which is on the right hand side. You can see how on the top left, how it looks like more gentle type mountains because of the folding. On the bottom, you can see the faulting, which with this one it would be more of a thrust, where it thrusts the earth up into the mountainous peaks. And then on the right hand side, you can see the volcano. At the top one, it shows 1963, then 1980, and then 1982. And you can see how the top of the mountain collapsed and formed the volcanic crater, which is really cool. Now, something that you also need to pay attention to whenever we're talking about the earth and the geologic processes is how weather will also erode. Weather and wind and basically the elements will erode what the earth's surface looks like. You can see on the top left hand picture of the folding mountains where how smooth some of them look, especially where it's got the ice on the top of it. Now anytime you have snow accumulation, snow melting, snow accumulation, snow melting, you're going to have erosion and runoff from where the water, or when the ice melts, the water flows down it. And this is going to help smooth out a lot of the surfaces of those mountains and make them more smooth instead of jagged. In the picture at the bottom left, you can see there's not really snow on the top of it. The rock has been thrust up. There's not much eroding going on other than wind erosion. And then with the volcanic, it's unstable anyway. But basically, the snow that's on it can also help erode. You can see on the top picture on the right-hand side the pattern of the snow drift coming down the mountain. And that's going to be the exact line that the water runs down whenever it melts, and it can actually form streams coming down the mountain. So it's also going to erode it. So through this, we've learned a few different standards. The first one, through the lithosphere, is we were able to recognize and describe the different geological processes that help shape the earth. The hydrosphere standard, we were able to understand and describe how weathering forms soil and how weather and erosion change the earth's surface. And then we looked at the biosphere. We were able to recognize and describe different biomes and how they are affected by the weather, plant and animal activity, and geologic processes. So on this one, we focused primarily on the geologic processes.